Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our District Administration Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Supporting Student Physical, Mental, Social, and Academic Well-Being Through After-School Opportunities. And all this is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor that we have here today, Right at School. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items very quickly. If at any time today, if you need any technical support, please just use the chat panel, which you can find it's on the lower right hand of your screen there, and then just select on my name, Stephen Blackburn, our host, and then just type your message and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat that you can dial in if you want to listen privately or if you don't have any speakers, so look out for that as well. In our webinar today, we'll also be welcoming any questions that you have. So there will be a Q&A session that will be happening at the end of the presentation, and you can submit a question at any time, not just at the end, by using the Q&A panel, like the chat panel, and that is at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. If you currently don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just look again, lower right-hand side of your screen, and then just click the expand triangle. Also, the last thing I'm going to mention, then we'll get right started, is that if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who is here today and everyone who registered, all of you will receive an email with a link to the slides, as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker that we have with us today. Please welcome Dr. Don Bridges, who is the Vice President of Educational Affairs over at Right at School. Great to have you with us here today, Dr. Bridges. This should be great.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm really excited to be here and excited for everyone who's joining us today. I think now more than ever, this topic is pretty relevant and critical. And so I'm excited to be able to take some time and share some of what I've learned through this process in my journey around really working to meet the best needs of all learners. And so I think today this webinar really is meant to dive in and accomplish a few things. We really want to make sure that we create the best system of support for all students. And that must include before, during, and after school. And so I'm going to really take some time to dive in and talk a little bit about a new term, kind of catchy phrase out there around an ecosystem and what that can really look like for your school district. We're going to talk specifically about those key things that need to go in that ecosystem to support students' physical, mental, social, and academic well-being, such as relationships, building that wonderful sense of belonging that we know is so critical, and how ultimately, when we look at things in a very holistic view, how we can really work to meet the needs of all students. As Stephen shared, I am Dr. Don Bridges. I'm the Vice President of Educational Affairs with Right at School. And you can see my bio up here. I have over 30 years of experience in the field of education, more than 25 specifically in public education, having many roles from classroom teacher, elementary school principal, up through the district office. I also am the co-lead for AASA, which is the National Superintendent's Organization. I support their SEL cohort because it is an area that is very near and dear to my heart. I am also the executive director of Suburban School Superintendents. Those are really all about my what's. It's not really necessarily about my who I really am or why I really am. And so who I am is I'm a mom. I have 5 kids, 3 of my own and 2 bonus kids with my husband. I am a wife, and I'm also a sister. And I'm a sister of a sister who is special needs. And so this mission and what I've really focused my life's work on is really how do we work to meet the needs of all students? How do we really ensure that we're providing them with an educational experience that is personal to them, that meets them where they are, that provides them with the support that they need in order to thrive in whatever it is they want to do or become when they grow up and beyond into adulthood. So that is my personal mission. That is my why. That drives what I do on a daily basis. But that's enough about me. So let's just dive in and really focus on kind of where we are and kind of setting the stage of what this looks like. So I want for you to take a minute and I want for you to think about the most impactful relationship in your own personal education journey. I want you to think about your childhood, those formative years that you've had. And if you can come up with a relationship kind of at that elementary level, that's great. If you can't, that's great too. But think about what that was like. Was it in junior high? Was it in high school? Or maybe it even was in college. But what's the most impactful relationship in your personal journey? Take a minute to think about that. I'm sure that if I could see all of you right now, you'd have big smiling faces. Your faces would be all lit up because what's coming to you right now is a flood of positive memories, vivid visuals of that person that you're thinking of. And what it's really done to you is maybe it could be some type of emotion. I'm going to open up the chat right now and I'm going to ask you to think about why this relationship was most impactful to you. What made it so memorable to you? So go ahead and just put a couple words in the chat right now about what made it so impactful for you. What was that key reason? And don't everybody all pipe in at once. Mm. Seeing someone wrote about, someone who helped them with their struggles. Any others? Oftentimes I get things such as they believed in me. I think about my own personal educational journey, and I think about my 4th and 6th grade teacher who happened to be the same, Miss Kelly. She was amazing because she didn't judge me. She believed that I could be anything that I wanted to be at that age. And she was willing to do anything it took to encourage me and to provide me the support necessary in order to make those shifts and changes. Mm. Somebody else referred to their high school English teacher and supporting them for that love of reading and to keep them going. I think that's really kind of what that's at. It's those people and those thoughts about what they do and how they've really been able to impact you in that very positive way. And there's a lot of research that supports that. And we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. But I wanted to kind of frame things for you about the direction that we're going to be headed in today. So first, I'm going to kind of start at that 50,000 foot level and thinking about this new approach to student success. And it brings to mind for me AASA's Learning 2025. So for those of you who aren't familiar, and I know during this webinar today, different links and stuff will be shared with you, and you can always reach out to me at any time to get that information. But during the pandemic, AASA put together a commission of educators, of superintendents, of business leaders, and of educational researchers to really talk about what is student success and what does student success look like. And so they came up and designed this kind of more holistic hands-on approach. And you can see at the beginning, at the center of that core is how do we really think about redesigning and re-engineering what school can and should look like? And then also ultimately, how can we think about students and how can students have a more active participatory role in what they're doing? And so when you look at this in a very holistic way, you can see on the outer edge, there's 3 big components: resources, social, emotional, and cognitive growth, and then ultimately thinking about culture. And we know culture trumps all, and the importance of ensuring that we're focusing on that whole student and that everyone from an equitable lens is being included. When we think about social, emotional, and cognitive growth, you can see by that visual down there, it really kind of follows that like plan, do, study, act kind of format of really making sure that we're using information and assessments to think about where students are, where they need to go, and how we can provide that support necessary. And then lastly, more importantly, I think too, ultimately is around what are those resources? What does that look like? And so how can we ensure that we're using everyone in an all hands on deck approach to provide the necessary tools necessary to really kind of accelerate what that learning looks like? And we know that during that pandemic, things were challenging for many, for the staff, for parents, for families, for students, and for all. And so when we come back and we think about what can those learning accelerators be, AAS, they put out a lot of profound information and research to support that. And really thinking about how can we really create a greater community at large, knowing and recognizing that in order to get this accomplished, we need an all hands on deck approach. And so we're going to dive into kind of what some of those learning accelerators are, and thinking also about what are those social, emotional, and cognitive pieces, those skills necessary to kind of bring about that success for students. So we're going to first kind of talk about that student sense of belonging, because we know how important that is. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm sure many of you have seen CASEL's social emotional learning framework. It really does support and thinking about that sense of belonging is one of those 5 pillars to what kind of overarching and encompasses all around social emotional learning. We know that when kids feel confident and like they're a part of something that's greater than their own, they can be successful. Back in 2022, Psychology Today did a deep dive into more than 2 decades of research on the impact of sense of belonging over their overall well-being and success. When we think about that experience, though, it's really important that we think about that in a very holistic way, from when students get up in the morning until when they go to bed. We can't isolate that and just be thinking about what happens during the hours of 8 to 3. So there's a lot of research and a lot of trends that from my personal work, as well as what we see across the country, that we see that when students have the sense of belonging, it transcends directly back into that classroom. We see that there's a reduced likelihood that they're going to be absent. They want to be there, they're motivated, and more importantly, when they feel safe, they're also more ready to learn. And so ultimately, they can achieve greater sense of academic achievement in that regard. The key to all of building that sense of belonging has to focus around relationships. Relationships are the key to everything, if we think about it. And actually, Linda Darling Hammond does a lot that focuses on that's one of the key main learning accelerators is around the relationships. We know that when we look at how kids and students feel, and they have that, and that's why I bring you back to where we were earlier today in the start of this webinar, thinking about those impactful relationships, thinking about those people who ultimately believe in you being able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. We think about that student support system so that when they are ready and they're able and they feel safe, it directly transcends back into the classroom and their ability to be able to do skills and master those skills as well. And then ultimately, when they have that sense of belonging and they're a part of this relationship, then we know that it transcends back to them being a contributing member of society. Relationships are super impactful. And so thinking back to what I said earlier about that, I want you to come to this slide with that lens in mind. Developmental relationships, those are the close connections that young people have during those very formative years where they're discovering who they are. They're thinking about those gaining their abilities that shape their own lives, thinking about what they stand for and learning how to interact with others and their ability to contribute to the world around them. There's a big study that came out in 2020 that really focused on a group of about 13,000 students that they came together, and they really wanted to dive into some key pieces and learning about how they felt. And so there was about, they were 6th through 12th grade students. About 81% of them enrolled in school. 12% of those 13,000 kids were part of out of school programs, and 7% were part of some type of student support program. And ultimately, they were looking at 5 things. One, they were looking at relationship skills. Am I good at making friends? 2, social awareness. Am I a good listener when other people need me? Am I responsive? 3, am I a responsible decision maker? Like I can tell the truth, even when it's hard to be able to do so. 4th, they looked at self-management, like their ability to be able to finish things on time. And lastly, they were looking at self-awareness. I know who I am. I know what I believe in. And so ultimately, the study found that strong relationships positively impact youth development, where close to 2 in 3 youth who reported strong relationships, that's 68%, had higher self-rated social and emotional competencies, including self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and social awareness and relationship skills. So we know that when students have strong relationships, the impact of how that can transcend back into the classroom and their ability to continue and do wonderful things. I'm going to take a moment and pause and give a little bit of a context to a story. And this is my sister, Renee. She's 45 years old, and I like to say that she's my older sister. And if she was on this webinar right now, she'd be unmuting herself saying, Dawn, that is not true. You are older than me. But anyway, I digress. So Renee grew up, she was born in 1976. She grew up in the brink of inclusion. And my parents worked tirelessly to ensure that she was able to go to the neighborhood school and that she was able to be in classrooms with her same age peers. And so her educational journey was one that I watched, right there in the front row seats of to what her journey was like and how her journey was very different than mine or my brother's. When she got to high school, we know that through that whole process of the IEP process back then, the goal for her was to make sure that she could get a job, that she was employable. And so she was very fortunate in the high school that she went to, that they really did a lot to think about what happens after she graduated high school when she was 18 and what that really looked like. But ultimately, the goal, whether it was working as a bagger in a grocery store or what, it was just ultimately just to get that job, just so that she could have some piece of being a contributing person in society. Renee was very fortunate to get a job at Target. And she worked at a Target where we grew up, and her job every day was to go into the dressing rooms and clean them out and put the clothes that people left laying there back on hangers and put them back on the shelf. She had to go and make sure in the shoe aisle every day that they were all neatly stacked back where they needed to be on the shelves, and the left shoe was where the left shoe went, and the right shoe was the right shoe went. And of course, there's always those other duties as assigned, cleaning things, tidying things up. But ultimately, that was her job. And every day that she went in there, she did the same thing. After about 10 years, she transferred to another Target where she continued to do the same thing day in, day out, that mundane job. But she had a job. And so everyone was happy. After about 19 years, she moved. My parents moved, and she moved up to Northern Illinois. And my parents said, okay, within this mile radius, there are 3 Targets. Renee, let's take a drive and let's go through each of them, and you can decide which one you feel like is the place that you want to work. So they found a new home for her in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, at the Target out there. Shout out to Pleasant Prairie right now. And so she went to go start there. And she showed up on her first day with my mom, and her new manager looked at my sister and she started to cry. And my mom's like, "Why are you crying?" And the manager said, "Well, because I didn't know that your daughter had special needs." And my mom said, well, according to HIPAA, and of course my mom got all, you know, broad-shouldered and defensive and said, what difference does it make? And according to HIPAA, you don't need to have that information. And she said, oh, no, 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 no. That's not why I asked. I'm so sorry. I've overcome with emotion because I'm a young single mom and I have a daughter that has Down syndrome. And I know that your daughter is here to teach me a few things. And so that started Renee's journey in Pleasant Prairie at Target. And of course, Renee was expecting to continue to do the same things over and over again that she'd have done the previous 19 years. This was the first manager who sat down with my sister and said, Renee, what do you aspire to do and be within the Target Corporation? What do you want to do? All right, I'll pause because this is the moment now. Someone should be putting in the chat. What's the coolest job to have at Target? Anyone? Anyone? Yes, the coolest job to have at Target is to be a cashier. And so that's what she told her manager. And so guess what? That manager was bound and determined to make sure that my sister was going to be a cashier. Took several months. They raised the bar, but guess what? She's a cashier. And so for the last 7 years, my sister has been a cashier. She takes money, credit cards, she gives returns, all of that. Because again, it was about that relationship. It was about somebody who was willing to step up and to advocate and to say, you can do better. We want you to do better. And so that's my story. And that's where I think about how impactful relationships are and how we need to do a better job creating more intentional relationships for students and what that can and should look like. So with that, we're going to kind of think this is a good place to kind of transition back into after school and out of school time and bring that kind of back to top of mind and focus. There's a lot of research that really supports high quality after school programming, and that when these pieces are in place, you get to see these results. In fact, the research supports that the longer the students are in these types of programs, ultimately the best outcomes for those in need, you're going to get a decreased achievement gap. You're going to get better academic performance. But more than anything, you're going to get that positive mindset, better health, students who really want to be there. I would encourage you to take a look. We have an ebook that really kind of dives into those critical things about closing gaps, especially since COVID. The After School Alliance also has put a lot out around, what are those key factors that make quality after school programs and how you should work to think about putting those in place. And ultimately, This is After School is another report that's out there that really does highlight the need to be thinking about a more overarching, comprehensive view at what after school can and should look like. Ultimately, when we think about reimagining school, when we think about building this ecosystem, I want you to think about kind of more of like that community school vision. How can we do a better job when we think about students? How can we connect school, home, and community better? How do we create this hub to ensure, as we go back to that AASA report, it really clearly defines the need to make sure that families and communities are active participants in all student learning? We want to make sure that they have an active role. How better than to create this community hub that would reinforce these relationships, leveraging opportunities to build better opportunities other than just what happens 8 to 3. We know that there's not enough time in the day to accomplish what needs to happen. And so what better way to work to create better partnerships in what that could look like? I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'd like for you to think about the journey, the educational journey, your own journey. And if you can think about one skill or one attribute that you would like to see that all students have by the time they enter high school, what skill would that be and why? I'm going to open that chat back up again. I'm going to ask you to think about it. Let's see if I can get that chat up here. Maybe. There we go. What skill or attribute would you like to ensure that all students, all, when I say all means all, each and every student can have that attribute? What would that be and why? Anyone? It's a quiet group out there today. It's okay. It makes me think about Dr. Bill Daggett. And Dr. Bill Daggett has done a lot of research around successful schools. He's also part of that AASA's commission. And he likes to put things, oh, problem solving, I love it. He likes to put things into buckets, those skills into buckets. And so he puts them into three buckets. And a lot of the work that he's doing now, let me kind of give a little background for you, is his whole thing is really what defines successful schools and what defines success for students. And when we think about how the world is ever changing, and we think about technology, and we think about all the things that we need to be thinking about in the future, how important it is to be creating educational journeys for students that are focusing on certain skills, because most of the jobs that these students of today are going to be applying for don't even exist. The technology is increasing at such a rapid rate, there are going to be so many jobs that we don't need any longer. And so when we think about those skills that are necessary, such as, thank you, confidence, problem solving, resiliency, he puts these skills into three buckets. The first bucket is cognitive and academic skills, and that would include things like problem solving, reading, critical thinking. The second bucket is under the heading of self-leadership. It really is around self-control, grit, resiliency, self-advocacy, those key things that we would want students to have. And the last bucket is around that interpersonal, which I believe is one of the most important factors in that. And so thinking about that, in that bucket is collaboration, building relationships, conflict resolution, empathy. And so when we think about these skills that we know are so critical to the success for students, and we think about our school day and how it is created today, it's a lot of consumption of knowledge for students. How are we building more authentic opportunities for students to be able to dive in and dig deep into those skills for students? If we're taking an all hands on deck approach and we're working to create this ecosystem and expand these opportunities, we need to think about creating environments that are safe, where students feel that they have that sense of belonging. We want to make sure that in these environments that there's more rich and authentic learning experiences where students have those opportunities to try new things and master these soft skills in nurturing environments with mentors and teachers who are invested in them. And we're doing all that during the school day, but we also know principals, teachers, district administrators, whoever is on this webinar right now, we know that there are so many other things that we're trying to teach students. And sometimes, and it's in a very intentional way, that those opportunities for the soft skills kind of fall to the wayside sometimes. And so how can we expand these opportunities? How can we think about weaving in extended day learning opportunities for students and create these hubs so that after school they can have these opportunities to foster their love of learning? Think about those opportunities of what they're excited about, building that sense of belonging, having them opportunities to kind of dive in and what are the passion projects that they're interested in. We know there's a lot of research that supports that if students aren't thinking by the age of 9 or 10 what they feel they're good about, what they're excited about, and what they're interested in, we've kind of fallen to the wayside for them. And we want to make sure that we can give those experiences necessary. And if we build this ecosystem of learning hubs and strengthen these things, we know that we are more likely to foster high quality relationships in students, that they will give them opportunities to be more positive and environments that allow them to thrive. And that's a key piece for students to be able to have when we think about these learning hubs. We think too about those relationships and the intentional relationships and being able to provide opportunities for that to happen and to nurture those more intentional relationships also provides success for students. So I think about all of you on this webinar as district leaders. How are you going to foster more intentional relationships and skill building opportunities for your students? What does that look like? Where might you start? I'm just going to pause for a second. Do we have room to grow in ways of thinking about more equitable opportunities for before, during, and after school? Are there opportunities, even at the slightest bit, to take a step forward that you can think about how you can have a better thread about what happens before, during, and after school? There's a lot of research that supports that, and we know this. The longer students are with us during the day, the more impact, especially those who are more at risk. So how will you think about that you might go about this? I'll open the chat again just for a quick second to see if anyone has any thoughts or ideas about how they might foster some more intentional relationships and opportunities for students, and what might be resonating with you right now. Anyone? Just going to give you a little bit about ourselves. Again, I shared with you what we're passionate about. We are a mission-driven organization. We were founded over a decade ago with the desire to ensure that we were providing students with enriching experiences. We wanted to make sure that they had more structure and involvement and engagement. So ultimately, students felt more empowered about what they were doing. And then they had this sense and this love of learning that we know transcends when they go back into the classroom. We want to make sure that we recognize the opportunities that are out there, whether we're partnering with parents and families or we're partnering with school districts. We have many testaments around how we as partners have been viewed very highly with high satisfaction indicators across all levels of organizations that we work with. We work in large, diverse districts similar to Denver Public Schools. We started in the Chicago Public Schools and currently work with a number of large urban districts from New York City Public Schools to Fulton County to Elgin U46 in Illinois. We're very familiar with working with districts and schools with diverse populations. We currently serve more than 30,000 students daily and nearly 600 schools and over 100 plus school districts across the country to provide students with amazing programs. Every day, we're ever expanding, really working to become better partners with the districts that we work in and with the families that we serve. We want to make sure that when we go in and service and work with districts, we're talking about what's important to you. What are the outcomes that you want for students? So we're really proud of that. At this point, I'd like to just say thank you. I will open it up for questions and answers. I know I'm so grateful for district administration. We will be at the district administration conference that's coming up in Carlsbad, California in just a couple weeks, the beginning of November. We're also going to be at the district administration conference in Ponte Verde that takes place in December as well. So I will be there. And hoping to have greater, deeper conversations with any of you that are interested. And so with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions that anyone might have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Bridges. I
you.
appreciate that. And like you're saying, we've now come to the audience Q&A portion of our webinar today. And you can just send all of the questions that you've had in so that Dr. Bridges can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in all the questions that you have in writing, and you can do that by accessing our Q&A panel that we have right there. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the option next to the chat button. And if you can't see it, there should be 3 dots next to the chat button. Click on that. And that should bring you to the Q&A panel. All right, so for the first question that we have here, it's about skill building. When it comes to that, is there one skill that you can see come up in conversation time and time again?
It's a great question. I do. And actually, interestingly enough, I think if there were other researchers like Dr. Daggett on the call today, he would agree with me in the concept and the skill around empathy. And we know how important being empathetic is and really having a common understanding. And I would say that that would be the number one soft skill that is of what we would say is of value, and really wanting to make sure that we're working hard to foster and have a greater understanding of empathy and what that looks like for students. And I would like to directly then relate it back to the school structures and the school setting that we have, and are we providing intentional opportunities to be able to foster that type of skill in what we're doing and how we're instructing students on a daily basis.
Perfect. Thank you. Great answer. So next question. So this is about building a learning hub or ecosystem. What are the initial steps that need to be taken first?
So, wow, these questions are fantastic. I would say first, it's really important to be thinking about a vision. And so a lot of the work that I do as the Vice President of Educational Affairs is really sitting down with superintendents and district leaders and talking about, when we're thinking about what those opportunities are for students, really sitting down and thinking about their vision. And oftentimes what comes to mind is, do you have a profile of a graduate that you're working with? What are those skills that you as a district have identified that you want to make sure that all students have? I think about strategic plans or school improvement plans if I'm working with a building level leader around what are those outcomes that you want for students. So I think that that's the first thing, is making sure that you have that and that you're really mindful about, in order to get those skills and those outcomes mastered, what does that look like? We have to really be thinking beyond the hours of 8 to 3 in order to accomplish all that you have in those plans for students. That'd be number one. Number two, I think the other key piece is really working to build buy-in. And whether that's community engagement, I think first and foremost is having conversations with your school board and ensuring that they understand the why and the importance and the sense of urgency around, in order to best support our students and thinking about the skills that we're really wanting to make sure that we're working to master in students' educational journeys. That has to happen before, during, and after. And so I feel like from the board table all the way to the classroom and everyone in between, whether that's staff, teachers, paraprofessionals, I also think the community, it's important for the community to understand and know how important it is for them to wrap themselves around the students that we have of today for the future of tomorrow. Third, I would stress the importance, and as I highlighted earlier with the AASA 2025 framework, really is around, this has to be a holistic, all hands on deck approach. It used to be you put your kid on the bus or you sent your kid into the school building and the teachers and the administrators, just took care of everything. And we need all means all. And so for each and every student to get what they need to be able to have that. And so when I think about also all means all, I think about, the partnerships that are necessary, the business partnerships within a community, the fire departments, the police departments. But more than that, I think we also know and can recognize that in today's day of learning for students, the importance around solution providers. Solution providers are the people who are doing these things day in and day out, and they're experts in the particular field. And so I can speak to Right at School. This is all we do. We love kids and we focus on this time, and how can we make this time for students before school and after school be the best opportunities for students? How can we work to build what those interests are, whether it be through electives, through inquiry-based instruction, through building relationships, bringing in social emotional learning skills and opportunities for them to apply what they've done during the day in the after-school space. That's I think mostly important about that is kind of taking those four things to kind of get you going. And as always, I'm happy to have any further conversations with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And looks like a few more questions are coming in, but before I get to those, I just want to say, again, we still have time to submit any more questions that you may have. If you haven't already, so lower right-hand side of your screen, click on the three dots, and that should bring up the menu for the Q&A. Okay, so this question that came in a few minutes ago, are you able to provide, or what are measurement tool examples for an effective ecosystem?
Great question. I think it's important too, when you think about and you're working to kind of create what this ecosystem looks like, what's important to you as a district? What are those indicators of success? So every district is going to be a little bit different. Every district has to think about what's important to their community. Some may be more focused on academics. So how do we work to think about what are those measurement tools that are ultimately, is it an academic based or an achievement based? Or is it really a more well balanced? I think more often than not, we're thinking about what are those immediate feedback types of measures that we can meet students where they're at, and we can work to personalize their learning from this point forward. So I think about whether it's panorama surveys, thinking about that sense of belonging, to make sure that kids have that. And if they do, is that transcending back to your attendance data? So that's another means or another piece of measurement tool that can be used to ensure that you're moving the needle in that direction. And so I think it really takes time to sit down holistically with your board, with your district team, and your community to say what is important to us that's going to say that this is what we're working towards. And when we think about that system, what are those key levers that we can put into place? Is it building, after school? I think I'm always thinking progressively around what school can look like, where it really should go. We do what we do in the 8 to 3 space because that's what works best for adults. So is one of those measurement tools thinking if we can kind of do a better job, and I've done a lot of work in Canada, and they're blending their days. And so when we think about all hands on deck, we might have a solution provider helping to work with students at the beginning of the day, and there might be some itinerant services that are taking place that we as an outside person can work to support getting kids to where they need to be. During the school day, what does that look like? After school, how do we partner and have conversations with building administration to ensure that we're working alongside of you, not something completely separate? So let's just say if you're a character counts district or you work with PBIS, we want to make sure that, down to the vernacular, we're working and speaking in the same language that kids understand, so that there is that common understanding. So there might be tools to make sure that that's occurring. So it really is about having that conversation about what's important to you and your district, and what those outcomes and how you want to be effectively measuring to ensure that you're moving those needles. But I find that it really is about that balance and wanting to ensure that we're providing like that immediate feedback, and we're getting that pulse of where kids are and what they need in that moment to then move them forward to that next piece.
Perfect. Thank you. And I have gotten a few questions directly. So I'll just answer it here now that yes, if you registered for this event, then you will receive an on-demand video as well as a link to the slides at some point from us at DA. Yes, let's see, other question that came in. Would it be possible to, share any research articles that you were referencing in the presentation?
Absolutely. We will make sure that we provide those as well. I believe that there is a link that will go on there. You can either direct message me. I'm happy to share that with you. I think my team also put in there my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn sign on, my email. So you can email me if there's something specific. I'm more than happy to reach out and share that with you. I know a lot of it. Our website, writeatschool.com, is a great space. There is a link within our website that you can go to that has some of our resources and research and some of our white papers around our success stories.
All right, perfect. Oh, I was actually, that looks like another one just,
Great.
uh,
Keep them coming.
oh, where did it go? I'm sorry, I'm gonna go through my closing slides in a second, because it looks like it disappeared, but if that person who put in that question, please put it right back into the chat and I'll answer it as soon as possible. And actually too, while I do go through some of my closing slides in a moment, please feel free, all of you, to continue submitting any questions that you have, and we'll make sure us at DA will be we'll send those questions over to Right at School so that they can be answered at some point after the event. But yes, thank you again, Dr. Bridges, for your time here today. And of course, thank you to Right at School. So I'd also like just take a minute to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today. For those of you who enjoyed what you saw, there are many upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by district administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, as well as current issues in K through 12. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to DA, and they stay up to date with us in our print magazine, in our online publications, in our newsletters, web seminars, and like Dr. Bridges was saying, we also host our District Administration Leadership Institute. And as you mentioned, Right at School will be at our next two summits. The first is at the Omni La Costa Resort and Spa in Carlsbad, California, and that's let's see, November 9th through the 11th. And the second summit that they'll be at is Ponte Vedra Inn and Club in Ponte Vedra, Florida. That is in mid-December, December 14th through December 16th. So we hope to see you all there. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that, what you saw, what Dr. Bridges talked about would be helpful to your colleagues, and I'm sure that is the case. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we at DA will be sending you an email at some point later tomorrow. And in that email, we'll be including the on-demand recording of this webinar, and you'll also find the slides there as well. So with that, on behalf of DA, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you.